Welcome back, everyone. Welcome. We hope you had a good break. So this morning we have covered CBDC and digital asset in the morning. One key point that our speaker Dante Disparte mentioned was that blockchain can be seen as an augmented technology compared to internet as a disruptive technology. So let's venture into the next topic.
Right, let's venture on the topic further and start off the afternoon session with blockchain. So the topic for this session is opportunity for digital finance. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the moderator of the session, Chief Executive Officer, Smart Contract Blockchain Studio, คุณสถาพล พัฒนคูหา ขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับด้วยค่ะ
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Please join me to welcome our panelists on the stage, Bupen from Accenture, and also Matthias from the Swiss Blockchain Federation, and also Kun Thawatchai from BCI and Kun Thai Bank. Well, it's great pleasure for me to be here. I'm Bang Sathapon from Smart Contract Blockchain Studio, and today we have an honor from our distinguished panelists. First of all, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your story as a blockchain leader in blockchain industry? Can we start with Bupen?
Thanks, Bang. My name is Bhupendra Varathe. I'm based out of Singapore, work for Accenture. In my role as a APAC head for banking and cloud technologies, I work with lots of financial institutions, not only in Thailand but in the broader region. And as we all know, blockchain is a very important technology for finance transformation, digital transformation, not only for the banks but finance as an industry. So I work with various projects and ensure that we meet the client's requirements based on what they are looking for. Thank you.
Hey, Matthias.
Yes, good afternoon. Sawadee krap.
How's it going?
My name is very good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Matthias. I'm wearing two hats today. I am founder and chairman of the expert council of the Swiss Blockchain Federation. That's a public-private partnership organization in Switzerland to increase the competitiveness and attractiveness of Switzerland as a blockchain hub. And my other hat is I'm founder and CEO of CVVC. That stands for Crypto Valley Venture Capital. We invest in startups that build products and services based on blockchain technology. It's a global approach, and we are right now looking into expanding into Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Matthias. Good to have you here. Lastly, Kun Thawatchai, please.
ครับขอบคุณครับสวัสดีครับ Hi, my name is Thawatchai Chiwanont. Since Matthias got two hats, I got two hats too. I'm Vice Chairman of BCI Thailand. Many of you might know Blockchain Community Initiative, which this morning we have a session about the ELG. I also have the other role as the head of the global transaction banking at Kun Thai Bank.
Wow, we have very big name here in blockchain industry. I'm also a blockchain service provider myself. One of the most common question I always get from top management and also from policymakers, why blockchain matter and why should they care? Bupen, can you please help us understand why blockchain and what is the latest development in this space?
Thanks. I'll try to keep it very simple so that everybody can understand. Firstly, what is block? Block is information stored in a data set. It can be financial transaction. It could be medical records. So what is blockchain? Blockchain is basically any user submitting a block information is hashed, and every time there is an amendment or update to that block, it is again hashed and put into the next block, and that's where the chain comes into play. The blockchain technology is implemented using distributed ledgers, which we also call it DLT. And Ethereum is one of the leading and one of the first one to implement distributed ledger. And that's where the DLT really brought in smart contracts, which eliminates for a central authority to come into place. So essentially, in distributed ledgers, all the computers in the network are connected, and whenever any user is submitting a block, that needs to be validated and authenticated by consensus within the network, and then only it is added to the chain. So Ethereum is one of the important DLT technology which initially came in, and there are now many technologies which the industry has seen. Back to your question on what is new and what is coming up. Before I go into that, where is blockchain used in finance? Blockchain is used for many things, for payments in cross-border. There's lots of bespoke payment solutions. Bitcoin is another one. One of the most important things blockchain has brought in is tokenization of physical assets. So you start with tokenization of physical assets, then you fractionize those assets into tokens, you sell tokens, and then you can also have programmed tokens which can even distribute the dividends to the owners. So it can go up to that level where really it can automate lots of things, and intercompany automation, intercompany usage of information and exchange of assets can be traded on various exchanges. So there are many use cases in finance. What really fascinates me is the whole soul-bound tokenization, and that's something very, very important, and I feel that will completely change the way blockchain industry works. What is soul-bound tokenization? This is where you get non-tradable assets. This is about the information about the individual, and it creates the fingerprint of the individual. Let's say if you are passed out from Harvard, your information about your education is Harvard is embedded into that, and you can carry that token from one place to another, anywhere, not only in one distributed ledger, but across the distributed ledgers. So it really is going to change the authentication and identity of an individual, and that's something is going to come big time in next few decades. Thank you.
I would agree. Soulbound will be changed how with authentication and also digital identity. Can we please elaborate a bit about how the soulbound token will change the authentication and the way we work with identity?
So it really keeps the information about who you are, your education, about your medical records, about your all your personal private data, and then you can share it where you want, and the standard will really allow the blockchain companies and blockchain platforms to really make it interchangeable so that the authentication becomes a lot more simple. One of the biggest problems the blockchain industry is facing is the authentication of individuals and authentication of companies. And I think this is where the individual's authentication is useful for private needs, as well as when an individual is working in the corporate, there as well it is required. The same concept can be used for KYC, know your customer. It can be used for loading the data for the corporate information. And all of that thing is so useful when you do the trading, when you do the business from individual to the bank and from bank to bank.
Wow, thank you for a very insightful idea. Over to Matthias. We are very well aware that technology is very important, but the blockchain project that success need a strong ecosystem to thrive. And from your experience at Swiss Blockchain Federation, what are the key factors in creating strong and successful blockchain ecosystem?
Well, what maybe some of you don't know is Switzerland is considered to be the largest blockchain ecosystem in the world, with over 1,200 companies based out of Switzerland with blockchain at their core activities and over 6,000 employees working in the sector, right? So we looked at other technology and venture ecosystems, trying to understand how they work and how they evolve. Ecosystems like the Silicon Valley. And there's, of course, many factors that contribute to a functional and flourishing startup and technology ecosystem, but you can narrow it down to basically 4 pillars. And the number one pillar, the most important one, is you need the talent, you need the projects, you need the great founders that drive innovation. That is pillar one. And normally, if you have that, capital follows, which would be pillar number two. That very much happened in 2017, 2018, in the early days of this ICO, initial coin offering explosion. That was very much happening in Switzerland, where hundreds of millions were flowing into Switzerland to support these projects. What you then need is the pillar three, is a functional infrastructure. So not only physical infrastructure like office space or like, let's say, basic technology, but you need service providers that can cater to the needs of these startups. You need corporates that want to use the technology that is being developed. You need academia that can come up with new talent. And then, of course, the fourth and maybe the most important pillar in an ecosystem like that is you need a legal framework. You need a regulatory framework that is supportive, and you need a supportive government. Now, in Switzerland, we were very lucky to have champions in the government. On the highest level of the government, we had two federal councillors. In Switzerland, that was the Minister of Economic Affairs and the Minister of Finance, who were very supportive, who wanted to understand what Crypto Valley is and what you can do with the technology. And so we tried to build the bridge to the government by starting the blockchain task force, which was back in the days, 2016, 17, consulting the Federal Council on how to come up with a smart regulatory framework. And out of that task force, eventually, because we had a network of 50, 60 experts in the space, we created the Blockchain Federation, which today is a public-private partnership. So we try to include all stakeholders, not only the startup ecosystem, but also the corporates that want to use the technology. We have members from politics, academia, society. So it's really important to include all stakeholders in such an organization. The federation is structured with a couple of bodies. So you have the General Assembly, the board, and then we have a so-called expert council, where its members constantly monitor the global and national developments in blockchain. And then, of course, we work with working groups that are very specifically addressing topics. That's currently 5 working groups. The most active one is the one for regulation. And then we have one for the banking industry. We have one for everything else. It's called industry and value chain. We have a digital asset working group and a sustainability working group. So this is the setup of the Blockchain Federation in Switzerland.
Wow, can't wait to catch a plane to Switzerland. Asking for a small and medium-sized Web3 or crypto founders, how can a startup team that would like to join your Swiss Crypto Valley, how it possible and how to join? Can it be remotely, or you have to be there?
No. So there is the Swiss ecosystem, and the regulatory framework basically comes at the price. So Switzerland is not known to be cheap. So for startups, it might be a challenge to set up shop here. If you have a business model that can take advantage of the Swiss regulatory framework, there's many organizations here that can support. We invest as CVVC, my other hat, we invest in startups from all over the world. So we can support startups also from Southeast Asia. So please reach out to us. We're happy to help.
Wow. Okay, back to คุณทวัชชัยครับ We know you have 2 hats also in Krung Thai Bank and also BCI. Can you please share your use case of blockchain in trade finance and how it works in Thai ecosystem?
Okay, so back to our home country, right? I think since we see the blockchain technology, right? And then 4 years ago, the BCI or Blockchain Community Initiative Thailand has been set up by the 6 bank with the support from Bank of Thailand. At that time, we try to look at the use case on how we're gonna, elevate. With the technology coming in, how we're gonna have a technology that can drive or elevate the capability of the Thai, business communities. one of the case that BCI Thailand at that time think that the corporation or the small SME, one of the pain point they have is that they have to ask for the letter of guarantee from the bank, and most of at that time most of those processes are on the paper, right? So we think about so 6 banks sit together, think that one of those use case should be about having the electronic letter of guarantee, based on the blockchain technology. So we successfully launched in July 2019 with only a small set of banks. But at this point in time, we have about 19 banks joining. And we have about 200 corporations and small SME join this blockchain initiative. So they be able to improve their efficiency in terms of the issue letter of guarantee. So benefit for bank, the company, as well as the beneficiary companies.
So how much BCI help to reduce the friction between parties?
Yeah, I think the technology is probably the last part. It's the important part, but it's not the most important. I think the most important will be to redesign all the business process, right? So we try not only the pain point that we try to solve, but also we look at all the friction point, in regarding to the process. For example, the origination of the letter of guarantee, the issue of letter of guarantee, as well as once there is the claim. So we also look after all the process after that.
So blockchain can be beneficial to every aspect. It is technology magic. It needs strong ecosystem to support, and it needs a business rethink on how we do every day to make success. It seems they introduce a lot of benefit to us, but let's do some reality check. Again, คุณทวัชชัยครับ in one of the most challenging things in implementing blockchain is the governance between parties and stakeholders. Can you please share your experience dealing with stakeholder with this issue in project, and what is the most challenging things that you have overcome? I know you have a lot of pain through this.
Yeah, I think the bank normally when we operate as a bank, right, we compete with each other, right? So once we have a clear objective that we want to supporting the country, right, helping elevate the financial capability of the Thai business, as well as we have a very good support from Bank of Thailand. So Bank of Thailand as a facilitator. So the bank sit down, work together, and we try to take off our hat as a bank when we compete. But we take a look at if we have a common objective, we align it. We focus on solving all the business, IT, and legal issue. And at that time, I think it spends 1 or 2 years before we come up with the conclusion, and then we be able to launch the project in 2019. So I think the governance is very important, right? One of the beauty of the blockchain is basically, since as Kun Bupen mentioned, as a block on the chain, right? So meaning whatever information of each bank customer rely on that blockchain is basically secure and is keep it as a private to that particular bank and customer only.
Why private transaction is important to the business case of BCI?
Because it's about sensitive information, right? About the deal, about the buyer and seller agreement, as well as the credit situation of each particular customer. So that's why the information is very sensitive. That's why we see that the blockchain is the technology that actually answer all this question.
Well, that's why we need a specific governance for each specific use case to resolve that private information between parties. And over to Matthias, it's about law and regulation. Every innovation challenges the status quo, and can you please give us a few key regulatory and legal challenges for blockchain adoption, and how did regulators around the world respond? Matthias? or it seems connection problem. Can you please over to Bupen? From your experience, what are some key challenges you have seen the traditional companies that try to adopt blockchain?
So the first and important thing is, as Kun Tawachai mentioned, blockchain is not about the technology, it is about enabling the business. Most of the time, when a enterprise is coming into the blockchain or going into the distributed ledger adoption, they see this as a technology project. And they don't start with where are the friction points, why do we need blockchain in first place, what are the business processes which needs to be automated, how do we integrate the business processes back into your back office systems. All of those things are overlooked. And most of the time, the business head and the IT head, they just want to get a node and install it into the company without even interfacing it with the back office systems. So what is really important is to see this as a business enabler. What is really important is to create a business case within the company and see how we can eliminate the friction and automate the whole process. End of the day, the real use of DLT in the blockchain is to have inter-company communication and to avoid all kind of manual activities, a lot of paper-based activities. Trade finance in banking industry is a very good example, which is very, very paper intensive. And many other things, and we've seen it in Thailand, the letter of guarantees or ELG, which has been automated using blockchain. That really eliminates a lot of those pain points related to intercompany interaction, as well as having frauds, a lot of proof of documents, all of those things are required. So that's the first and the most important thing. The second important thing is about training people or having human talent. And that is, in 90s, most of the companies, including banks and large companies, they have invested, they have trained their people to become DBS. When the relational database came into existence, people were sent for training to become DBS. On the similar lines, companies have to invest into their talent, into their people. The good news is blockchain technology is not that difficult. But the real challenge is there's not enough talent pool. But there are a lot of certification programs by leading institutions across the world. Individuals can be encouraged to enroll into those programs, and they can take certification on blockchain. So I think it's an investment required, very similar to what the institutions have done in 1990s for the DBAs. On the similar scale, we need to invest into people, encourage them, so that we have people who understand blockchain technology. What is really important in case of blockchain and DLT technology, it is like you are building a road. At the same time, you are also building the material which is required for the road. So in this case, you are adopting blockchain technology. At the same time, you need to train the people really who are going to build that technology.
Wow, very, very good analogy. And going back a bit about the business integration and business transformation in blockchain, it's working with the industry that already interconnected, like bank, it's one thing, but can you please help us understand when we have to transform business that haven't interconnect before or do not have intermediaries before this, for example, healthcare?
Yeah, so I probably can take the example from which I have seen it myself in supply chain space. So to implement blockchain in supply chain means the two buyer and seller, they are having an agreement as a form of purchase order or sales order, and then there is a shipment happening, so you get another entity to join the blockchain, which is the shipping company, the logistic companies, the banks, the insurance companies. There are various roles who have to play. There are various parties who have to play different roles in a particular transaction to make it happen. So sometimes for the blockchain technology, getting critical mass is very difficult because everybody to be part of the blockchain community is extremely difficult. And that is one of the biggest challenge we are facing, where the cross-industry collaboration is becoming extremely difficult. And trading is one such example where you need at least 7 to 8 industries to participate to execute one trade between buyer and seller. So these are some of the examples which are, and same thing applies for healthcare industry where you have hospitals, pharma companies, research companies, logistic companies. They all have to participate to execute procurement or procure to pay kind of transaction. So I think the cross-industry participation is one of the biggest challenge.
Wow, thank you. Matthias, we talk a lot about challenges in implement locally or also internationally cross intra-organization and also cross-organization. Its challenge, says as core, its challenge laws and regulation. Can you please give us a few challenges and how did regulators around the world respond to this?
I think the main challenge for all regulators around the world is that innovation always drives regulation. So as a regulator, you are always behind. You need to catch up. You need to create rules that innovation is creating, and the space is changing constantly. And what the regulators do is they try to regulate the space with existing frameworks and concepts. And what you want to do, at least if you as a jurisdiction, as a government, want to create an ecosystem that is favorable for innovation, you want to avoid so-called dumb regulation that kills off innovation. So you want to come up with a smart regulatory framework that can foster innovation and an ecosystem like ours, while at the same time protect national interest, investors, for example. So it's a tricky task. It's a very challenging task to regulate this, very fast developing space. Now, what areas do you have to regulate? And I think a good approach is to look at the various token categories there are. I'm not sure if you are all familiar with the token categories. In 20, I think Switzerland, the Swiss regulator categorized 3 different tokens, so digital asset categories, if you want to say so. So there's the utility token, there's the asset token or the asset-backed token, and there's the payment token. And already in the terms, you can see what they are used for, right? So if you create a utility with a digital asset, it's a utility that you create. An asset token means there's something backing that digital token, and the payment token is, of course, used for as a means of payment. Now, each of these use cases, they touch different laws. And what I think is really difficult for regulators is the complexity of the regulatory or of the legal framework in the respective countries. Very much so in the US, where you have different agencies that regulate the space, especially in the securities area. Now, if you look at the global regulatory approaches, there's mainly 3 different types of approaches that you can see. You have countries that are regulated, so they have the framework for blockchain and crypto in place, such as Switzerland. There's others. There's been very early adopting countries like Estonia, Liechtenstein, and others, of course. And then you have jurisdictions or countries where the situation is unclear. So there is not a specific regulation in place. There's existing frameworks that are used, but it's unclear to what extent all these different use cases would have to be compliant to the legal framework. And then there is countries where all activities are mainly banned. So these are the 3 approaches. Now, if you look at Switzerland, when it comes to regulation, has a technology and industry neutral approach. So it has a rules-based approach, same rules for same use cases, basically. And what Switzerland did is they didn't come up with a fully fledged law, but they rather came up with amending existing legal frameworks, existing laws. So they made over 10 amendments in existing frameworks. And you can narrow it down to three main areas. In the private law, in the civil code, the term token was introduced. So that is quite remarkable because it means in Switzerland, whatever business you build, if it's a token on a blockchain-based infrastructure, it is legal. And that is quite remarkable. The second area is the area of bankruptcy. That's important if you're a bank, for example. In Switzerland, we have challenger banks, so crypto banks. There you have to be able to segregate your assets very much so if you are active in the crypto space. And then the third amendments were in the area of financial markets, where a so-called DLT house license was introduced that should cater to the needs of decentralized exchanges mainly. Now, if you take a look at, we travel the world a lot and we talk to a lot of regulators all over the world. What do they struggle with the most? I think it's the ever-changing landscape of our space. Innovation is happening so fast. The topics that we now see that create concerns all over the world, I would say, is the area of decentralized finance, mainly non-regulated these days, and the bubble in there is already bigger than the ICO bubble had ever been 2017-18. Another area, of course, is the stable coins. And maybe a third one I can mention would be NFTs, because the use cases are so vast with the non-fungible tokens that it's hard to catch up. So that is maybe some sort of an overview I can give.
Thank you very much. So in some unregulated area like DeFi, but in the future, someday they will be regulated. How to find the right balance between innovation and consumer protection? Because today the attack is getting advancing every day. We have Oracle attack, flash loan, we have Tornado Cash. How we should find the right balance?
I think what's interesting is what we observe right now is that the main actors in the space, so the very large companies, the projects, and even the exchanges, they seek for regulation. So what's happening is they reach out to the regulators and they say, listen, we want to be regulated. If you want this industry that we are all in to really become a large and institutional grade industry, the sectors are going to be regulated, and they scream for regulation, very much so also in Switzerland, where we can see that a lot of these large companies reach out to jurisdictions, well-developed jurisdictions like Switzerland. Can you help us to get regulated? So I think it's the regulators that can work with these very large players in order to become a sustainable ecosystem that keeps everything in balance.
Wow, that's very insightful. Thank you. And moving forward to our last sector of today, we have talked a lot about why blockchain benefits challenges, technological challenges, business challenges, also regulatory challenges. But when it comes to adoption, Bupen, can you please share what are the main considerations when thinking about blockchain adoption, and also some example, what should be blockchain and what should not be blockchain?
Thanks. Firstly, I think we have to keep this in mind that blockchain is about cooperation. It's not about competition. Many times people look for use cases and try to see how I can have a larger share and protect the information for myself or the founders as compared to the participants. So those ecosystems and those networks where the nodes and all the participants are at equal footing, the success rate for them is a lot higher, where you try to keep something very exclusive for yourself. That's the first thing. The second thing is specific examples, and again I will take example from banking and finance industry. So quite a few number of times in finance industry people talk about payments. Can we put payments on blockchain? Now I would classify that into two categories. if you look into the domestic payments, where most of the markets, most of the countries, including Thailand, they are moving towards instant payments. And instant payments, you need end-to-end execution in less than 10 seconds. And that probably is not a good example to implement blockchain because the central system today is much better and current blockchain technology cannot scale up to that kind of demands because there is a huge scalability requirement on certain point in time. Also, the end-to-end execution sometimes can be a lot more than 10 seconds. The user experience required is like when I transfer money to you, it has to be done within less than 10 seconds. And that's where blockchain technology is not appropriate. But again, taking example of payments into cross-border or international cross-border payments, again, it is a very great example to implement using blockchain. There are some examples like Ripple and others where they have implemented blockchain technology for executing international payments. Why it is useful there? Because you don't need instant payment there. The scale is not as much as what is required for domestic payments between the two individuals or between business and the consumer or business to business cases. Also, blockchain's advantages of tracking, advantages of benefits of complete transparency of who are the correspondent banks involved into the cross-border payments. All of that transparency adds a lot of value. And that value is also coming in primarily on the back of anti-money laundering, fraud prevention, and sanctions implementation. So the banks are struggling with this space, and in cross-border payment, these are the things which will benefit blockchain. So just payment as an example, you see a contrast between not to implement blockchain for domestic payments and to implement for cross-border payments. So in summary, blockchain is a great example where you want to cooperate and where all the parties, all the nodes are at equal footing. And whenever there is interoperability required, it's a great example to implement this in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. So it comes down to it makes sense or not. I think in banking and financial, also trade finance, supply chain, it pretty much makes sense. We have a solid use case in blockchain, but in some area there's still a debate, especially in ESG. Matthias, what do you think some key use cases of blockchain could support ESG and sustainability, especially in environmental and social goal?
That's a good question. I think the term blockchain for good has been around since the very early days of our industry. And as I said initially, besides the Swiss Blockchain Federation with CVVC, we invest in blockchain startups, and we screen roughly 2,000 to 3,000 startups per year globally. And we get to see use cases in all sectors. Roughly half of the use cases are in the financial sector, and then it's very diverse across all sectors. We are also active in Africa. And why am I mentioning that? Because the use cases in Africa are very different to the use cases in developed countries, in first world countries like Switzerland, where you have very different needs also as a society, whereas in Africa, a lot of the use cases are in the area of assurance, financial inclusion, banking the unbanked, remittance, as Kun Bupen was just mentioning. So that's very interesting to see what's happening there. And if we look at our portfolio, so far we have invested in 51 startups globally, and many of those, I would say, roughly half of the startups, they cater to one of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, just because of the nature of blockchain and what you can do with this technology outside of the financial sector, maybe. And the range is very broad. It goes from impact investing to carbon credit tokenization, food safety, supply chain transparency, and many more. And maybe a few examples can help illustrate what that means. So one of our portfolio startups is called Tracifier. And Tracifier is a supply chain track and trace solution for the food industry. So organizations that use the application can prove that their products are traceable and their business documentation can be trusted. So Tracifier, in the end, they cover the whole value chain of food from the early stage of harvesting in farms, and then maybe for sampling purposes, quality assurance, testing in laboratories, and so forth. So basically, the whole supplying process of goods to the final consumers in the markets. Another one in the area of ESG is also a startup in our portfolios called Proof. And Proof is a service provider for ESG and impact data management. So let's say you are a construction company and you're building a dam and you want to be able to prove that it is sustainable, it's green. You need to have data that can actually be shown independently to your investors that it's actually the case. And it's the same for funds, it's the same for investors that need to prove that their investments are sustainable. So Proof, they have created a digital platform where you can verify and visualize comprehensive ESG and impact data based on blockchain technology.
Wow, thank you. Back to our homeland. I think Bank of Thailand and also banks, financial institutions, and a lot of people in Thailand put a lot of effort in financial inclusion, and we think we did achieve a very impressive goal. But Kun Thawatchai, how can blockchain help further the situation of financial inclusion and bank or non-bank?
If we take a look at the recent published financial landscape paper of Bank of Thailand, one of the key topics we talk about the financial inclusion, right? So I think as the commercial bank community as well as the BCI, we see that moving forward, right? Right now we talk about we used to talk about the prompt pay. And right now we have a PromptBiz, which basically we facilitate the digital, information about the trade, the payment, and the tax information all together, right? And if we put in all the stakeholder into this infrastructure, right, that means that we will have a lot more data in terms of the trade data into the system. So it's opened up the opportunity, right, for a small player. Especially small SME, which basically form a majority part of the Thai business community, right? But they don't have much access to the financial services. So by doing this, once we see the data, right, I think it's opportunity for the bank to also grant the loan for that small SME, based on the trade data that we see. And as Kun Bupen mentioned, right, this blockchain technology be able to enable, this capability for the Thai industry. So in the longer term, we see that this will be the main engine to propel the country in terms of the financial inclusion.
Thank you, Kun Thawatchai. That's very good conclusion. So that's come to an end of today's panel. Thank you to the panelists. Bupen from Accenture, Matthias from Switzerland, and also Kun Thawatchai. Can you please give a round of applause for our panelists this afternoon? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you, Kun Stapon, Kun Thawatchai, Bupen, and thank you, Matthias, for joining us online. A little photography session, if we could. Thank you very much. That was a very insightful session into blockchain opportunity for digital finance. I'm sure that was a great deal of noteworthy use cases of blockchain, what it takes to create a successful blockchain ecosystem, but also a little bit of a reality check on the hurdles and mainstreaming of blockchain and how to tackle the challenges. Just a gentle reminder that the session on CBDC Hackathon is now starting at the library stage on the second floor สำหรับท่านที่สนใจนะครับ ชั้น 2 ของเราที่เวที Library Stage นะครับเป็นผู้ชนะจาก CBDC Hackathon ที่รับรางวัลไปเมื่อเช้านี้นะครับเซสชั่นเริ่มแล้วเผื่อท่านใดที่สนใจสามารถเรียนเชิญลงไปฟังได้นะครับ